Hey everyone, have you ever wondered what life was really like hundreds or even thousands of years ago? Not the boring textbook version. I'm talking about the rules, rituals, and strange customs that controlled people's daily lives, and how some of these practices still quietly influence us today. From people running for survival in muddy medieval roads, to Tudor women navigating deadly beauty standards, to ancient Greeks risking life and limb for glory at the Isthmian Games, and Romans drinking wine according to strict social rules. History wasn't just about kings and battles. It was about how humans lived, struggled, and followed rules, sometimes ridiculous, sometimes deadly serious. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment telling me which historical period you'd least want to live in. Trust me, the medieval part will make you rethink every day you've ever complained about traffic. Imagine waking up in a world where survival is a daily negotiation. Roads are treacherous, often muddy from rain or dusty in the heat, stretching endlessly without signposts or maps to guide the way. Travelers risk losing themselves in fields and forests, with every mile potentially fraught with danger. Mobility in the medieval world was not a luxury or a choice. It was a necessity dictated by circumstance. Crop failures, rising rents, military raids, or the whims of a lord could uproot families overnight. Those who moved did so with the awareness that their very lives could depend on reaching the next village or safe haven. Medieval life was structured by rituals, customs, and social codes, deeply ingrained in both personal and communal existence. Even literacy, a rare skill reserved for clergy and nobles, carried weight. Love letters were often dictated to scribes, following strict literary conventions. The words had to be exact, the phrasing deliberate. Expression of emotion was not spontaneous, it was a controlled act shaped by cultural norms. Romance was therefore formalized, often mediated, and deeply intertwined with social expectation. Daily behavior was laden with symbolic meaning. The use of the left hand was stigmatized, associated with chaos, witchcraft, or evil intent. Children were compelled to learn right-handedness for writing, praying, and combat, a reflection of a society that feared even minor deviation from the norm. Personal appearance was another domain of social regulation. Mirrors were rare, so most medieval people understood how they looked through the eyes of others. Compliments, criticisms, and gossip were their only mirrors. Hair, in particular, carried moral and social weight. Women's hair was tightly controlled, a marker of virtue or impropriety, while haircuts could signify punishment, shame, or loss of identity. Objects were not mere tools. They were companions and extensions of the self. Weapons were named and cherished, shoes repaired endlessly, and tools passed down through generations. Most people owned a single pair of shoes, mended repeatedly, their survival dependent on careful maintenance. Noise was a social comfort, while silence was associated with death, spiritual danger, or supernatural threat. Children were integrated into labor early, their value measured in contribution rather than leisure or play. Memory and recognition mattered more than privacy. Being forgotten after death was one of life's greatest fears. Naming conventions, public records, and social rituals were meticulously maintained to preserve identity beyond mortality. Superstition and ritual were intertwined with daily life. Sneezing was not a casual event, it was a moment of vulnerability. Immediate blessings were required to protect the soul from demonic forces. Certain days were deemed unlucky for key actions, dictating when to plant, travel, or negotiate. Religion permeated every act. Canonical hours regulated daily schedules, marked by the tolling of church bells, creating a rhythm that dictated labor, prayer, and rest. Monks adhered strictly to these hours, but the people often emulated this schedule, structuring their existence around both spiritual and practical imperatives. Meals, too, were carefully regulated. Food availability depended on season, market access, and religious fasting. Salted meats, grains, and vegetables formed staples, while sharing food was both a necessity and a marker of communal cohesion. Hygiene concerns influenced table manners, evolving from survival requirements into markers of morality and social status. Even something as simple as picking up food required adherence to norms that signaled refinement, respect, and communal understanding. Despite the severity of everyday survival, medieval people found moments of humor, celebration, and social bonding. Festivals, fairs, and religious holidays punctuated the year, offering temporary respite from labor. Music, dance, storytelling, and games provided psychological relief and reinforced communal identity. These moments were not frivolous. They were essential mechanisms for maintaining cohesion, morale, and social order in a world often dominated by scarcity and danger. Death was ever present and unpredictable. Premature burial was a genuine fear, leading to the practice of wakes, delayed burials, and careful observation of the deceased. Social memory extended beyond life. Records, memorials, and rituals ensured that an individual's contributions and existence were recognized. Possessions, stories, and social acts became the threads that wove a person into the fabric of community life, providing a semblance of permanence against the impermanence of the world. Community and hierarchy defined nearly every interaction. Lords, tenants, tradespeople, and laborers existed in a complex web of obligation, protection, and mutual dependency. Punishments reinforced social norms, not merely as retribution, but as a means of teaching communal values and expectations. Social cohesion was paramount. Survival depended as much on relationships and adherence to norms as on physical skill or luck. The rhythms of medieval lifework, prayer, play, and ritual were intricately linked. Fear of the unknown, superstition, and religious devotion intertwined with practical measures for safety and survival. Every action carried weight, from the way a tool was handled to the gestures used in public. Life demanded vigilance, adaptability, and a constant negotiation with the unpredictable forces of nature, society, and mortality. Even in such a harsh and regimented world, resilience shone through. Humor, storytelling, and communal celebration allowed people to endure. Adaptation was key. Surviving meant understanding the balance between obedience and subtle personal strategy, between superstition and pragmatism. It meant finding meaning and joy in fleeting moments, while navigating a society governed by rules that often seemed arbitrary, yet were essential to order and survival. In essence, medieval life was a complex choreography of survival, ritual, and social expectation. Mobility, both physical and social, dictated daily decisions. Fear and superstition shaped thought and behavior. Objects and companions became extensions of identity, and social memory ensured one's place in history. People were constantly negotiating between personal need and communal expectation. between obedience and subtle self-expression. In a world without modern conveniences, safety nets, or technology, every act mattered, every ritual counted, and every relationship was a potential lifeline. This was a society defined not by ease or luxury, but by vigilance, adaptation, and the intricate web of human interaction. It was a world where survival depended on understanding the rules, both written and unwritten, and learning to navigate them with intelligence, patience, and sometimes a little bit of daring. In Tudor England, beauty was never merely aesthetic, it was a measure of morality, social value, and political influence. The world of a woman in this era was tightly scripted, where the shape of her body, the paleness of her skin, the softness of her hands, and even the smallest gestures dictated her place in society. Pale skin was idealized, a visual proclamation of indoor life, nobility, and obedience. Labor-worn, tanned skin suggested independence and outdoor toil, a sign of lower status that could jeopardize a girl's marriage prospects. To achieve this impossible standard, women turned to extreme and often dangerous measures. Lead-based powders, chalk mixtures, and vinegar washes were applied to the skin, creating the illusion of perfection at the cost of health. Yet, these cosmetic rituals were not optional. They were social mandates, enforced by expectation, gossip, and sometimes law. Female beauty in Tudor England was an armor, a currency, and at times, a weapon. But it was also a trap. Failing to conform could diminish opportunity, threaten familial alliances, or draw moral condemnation. Physical delicacy was prized above all else. Strength, assertiveness, or the display of independence in women was discouraged, feared, and sometimes punished. From an early age, girls were taught that softness was safety. Speech was measured and moderated. A single word spoken too boldly could signal immodesty, disobedience, or moral failings. Even movements, how one sat, walked, or gestured, were scrutinized, forming an intricate choreography of propriety that defined every public and private interaction. Cosmetics presented a profound paradox. They were necessary tools for survival in social hierarchy, yet they were morally suspect. Women were expected to appear flawless, yet were criticized for using makeup to achieve this perfection. Public condemnation, religious instruction, and societal gossip coexisted with private reliance on powders, paints, and scented oils. Beauty was simultaneously demanded and disparaged, a constant tension that women navigated with subtle cunning. Clothing, jewelry, and hairstyles were similarly regulated. Sumptuary laws dictated what fabrics, colors, and adornments were acceptable for each social class. Dress became a visible language, signaling wealth, allegiance, and obedience. Yet within these constraints, women exercised ingenuity. They used small choices in clothing, veiling, and ornamentation to influence social perception, curry favor, or assert discreet agency. Even minor adjustments could alter how a woman was perceived at court or in the marketplace. Marriage was the ultimate theater where beauty intersected with power. Early marriages were common, designed to maximize familial advantage and secure alliances. A woman's youth and physical appearance were often her most valuable assets. Queens were subjected to the most intense scrutiny. Their bodies and faces were politicized, tied directly to dynastic legitimacy and national stability. A blemish or perceived flaw could spark commentary that rippled through courts, councils, and common folk alike. Beauty became not just personal, but political property. Beyond appearance, behavior was equally regulated. Women were expected to be modest, silent, and compliant, revealing their intellect and opinion only when allowed. Subtle gestures, careful speech, and coded actions became means of negotiating influence without overt defiance. Agency in Tudor England was exercised within constraint, a delicate balance between obedience and strategic self-expression. Women learned to manipulate social codes, using charm, fashion, and subtlety to navigate court politics and societal expectation. Cosmetics, dress, and conduct formed a triad of power, constraint, and survival. While appearing beautiful and obedient, women had to monitor moral judgments, avoid scandal, and negotiate social hierarchies. Every social interaction was a test, every gaze a judgment, every whisper a potential risk. Power was fragile and conditional, yet skillful navigation of these rules allowed women to wield influence in subtle yet impactful ways. Tudor England also imposed public standards on moral conduct, which women had to internalize. Virtue was measured not only by behavior, but by visible indicators: skin, posture, dress, and hair. Hair, in particular, was a potent symbol. Women's hairstyles were regulated, elaborate, and communicative of status. A braid, a coif, or a veil could signify virtue, modesty, or obedience. Deviation risked social censure. Even the presentation of the hands, their softness, cleanliness, and gestures was socially loaded. Every physical trait was a narrative, interpreted by family, community, and court observers. Yet, within these restrictions, women found subtle ways to assert agency and influence. Clothing, ornamentation, and minor gestures became tools to shape perception, negotiate relationships, and exercise discretion in personal and political affairs. Women wielded influence not through overt power, but through skillful navigation of expectation, managing appearance, timing, and conduct to achieve desired outcomes. In essence, female agency was a hidden architecture embedded in the performance of beauty, compliance, and decorum. The paradox of Tudor life for women extended to cosmetic practices. While lead-based powders and dangerous ointments were widely condemned in sermons and literature, their use remained pervasive. The contradiction illustrates a society where appearance was morally regulated, but socially indispensable. Women internalized these paradoxes, balancing health risks against social reward, appearance against morality, and personal desire against communal expectation. Marriage markets were deeply influenced by these norms. A young woman's value was tied to her youth, physical beauty, and compliance with behavioral codes. Familial negotiations for marriage emphasized appearance as proof of virtue and reliability, while political considerations shaped matches, particularly among nobility. Queens, princesses, and elite women lived under constant scrutiny. Their features, expressions, and comportment were interpreted as symbols of dynastic stability and national well-being. Even minor imperfections could become public discussions, influencing perception, alliances, and policy indirectly. Cosmetics, clothing, social rituals, and controlled behavior formed an integrated system of observation, performance, and regulation. Every action was measured, every adornment interpreted, and every word weighed for its social, moral, or political implication. Tudor women operated within these constraints, mastering the subtle art of covert influence and tactical compliance. Survival, influence. Despite these rigid structures, Tudor women demonstrated creativity, resilience, and tactical intelligence. By mastering appearance, gestures, and social nuance, they could shape outcomes, secure alliances, and achieve influence without violating explicit norms. Beauty was thus not only a personal or familial asset, but a strategic tool, wielded with precision within a tightly controlled environment. This was a world in which every detail of a woman's life was scrutinized, regulated, and politicized. Success, safety, and social standing were inseparable from appearance and conduct. Tudor England demanded perfection, yet provided space for subtle maneuvering. The society balanced strict enforcement of norms with opportunities for strategic ingenuity, creating a complex, dynamic environment in which women negotiated identity, survival, and influence through beauty, behavior, and perception. Even seemingly trivial details, powdered skin, braided hair, soft hands, measured speech, had monumental consequences. In a society obsessed with visual and moral codes, mastery of these details could elevate a woman's status, secure her family's position, and influence political outcomes. Tudor England was a world where the personal was political, the beautiful was powerful, and survival depended on perfect performance. In the bustling city of Corinth, long before modern stadiums or Olympic broadcasts, a festival transformed the city into a vibrant epicenter of religion, athleticism, and commerce. The Isthmian Games, held in honor of Poseidon, were far more than a simple sporting event. They were a spectacle where divine reverence, personal glory, and economic opportunity collided. Corinth, a maritime powerhouse, used these games to assert both civic pride and religious devotion. The festival began with ritual sacrifices, offerings of livestock, and solemn prayers. Every athlete, every musician, and every merchant participated under the watchful eyes of the godsor, so the citizens believed. Victory was not merely personal, it was a reflection of divine favor, a tangible proof that the gods supported Corinth's citizens, their families, and their city-state. Athletes trained not only for physical dominance, but for spiritual validation, their bodies instruments of devotion as much as competition. Athletic events were fierce and demanding. Foot races tested speed and endurance. Wrestling, boxing, and pancration challenged strength, strategy, and resilience. Chariot races, perhaps the most thrilling and dangerous, filled the circus of Corinth with dust, noise, and peril. Crashes and injuries were common, yet they added to the spectacle. Winners were celebrated not just for their physical prowess, but for embodying discipline, courage, and divine favor. Poets composed verses in their honor, musicians performed tributes, and the city itself recognized their achievements with public accolades. Fame, political influence, and social mobility awaited those bold enough to seize victory. The festival was a magnet for commerce. Merchants traveled from across Greece, setting up stalls to sell food, wine, textiles, and trinkets. Trade fairs coincided with the games, transforming Corinth into a hub of economic activity. The Isthmian Games were as much about market deals and commercial negotiation as athletic glory. Artisans, traders, and sailors mingled with aristocrats and common citizens, all drawn together by the overlapping pull of devotion, spectacle, and profit. Yet the games were more than athleticism and economics. They were deeply ritualized expressions of civic identity. Sacred truces were declared during the games, temporarily suppressing local conflicts and feuds. Even warring city-states paused hostilities to allow safe passage for participants and spectators. This truce was a reminder that in the Greek worldview, religion and competition were intertwined, and civic cohesion was paramount. However, tensions occasionally flared, disputes erupted, and rivalries between city-states or even local factions sometimes boiled over into violence. The games reflected both the ideal of harmony and the realities of human conflict. Musical and poetic competitions accompanied the athletic events, highlighting the cultural dimension of the festival. Musicians performed in open-air theaters, poets recited epic verses, and actors sometimes staged mythological dramas. Excellence in the arts was celebrated alongside athletic triumph, reinforcing the Greek ideal of kalakata, the harmonious balance of physical and moral excellence. Victory in these contests brought not only prestige but also tangible rewards, prizes, dedications in temples, and lasting recognition in the annals of Corinthian history. The city's maritime culture and economic ambition were also on display. Corinth's harbor bustled with trade, and the Isthmian Games provided an opportunity to showcase wealth, influence, and organizational skill. Officials coordinated housing for visitors, maintained the schedule of events, and ensured sacred observances were respected. Festivals were meticulously planned, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of logistics and social engineering that rivaled the challenges of modern event management. Athletes were both admired and envied. A champion could rise from obscurity to prominence, gaining patronage, public honors, and even political influence. Yet the life of a competitor was perilous. Injuries could end careers, failure could bring disgrace, and rivals often plotted against those who threatened their prestige. Fame was fleeting, and the memory of triumph depended on public commemoration through poetry, inscriptions, and statues. The stakes were both mortal and immortal, immediate reward and lasting remembrance. Religion infused every aspect of the games. Poseidon's sanctuary was central, and all events were framed as acts of piety. Sacrifices were performed before competitions. Athletes offered prayers for favor, and victories were attributed as much to the gods as to human skill. Even the commercial activities were imbued with ritual. Merchants gave thanks for safe trade, and festivals honored the divine patron of the city. In this context, commerce, religion, and competition were inseparable, each reinforcing the other in a tightly knit social fabric. Over time, under Roman influence, the Isthmian Games evolved. While maintaining religious significance, they became increasingly commercialized and international, attracting spectators and participants from distant regions. Trade flourished, and Corinth's economic reach expanded alongside the spectacle of athletic and cultural achievement. Yet the Games never lost their spiritual foundation. Sacrifices, sacred truths, and divine observation remain central to their identity. The Isthmian Games reveal a society where identity, prestige, and survival were intertwined with religion, competition, and commerce. Every foot race, every musical note, every trade negotiation reflected a broader cultural narrative, one in which human skill, divine favor, and civic pride were inseparable. Spectators, athletes, and citizens alike were participants in a grand ritual that celebrated excellence, enforced social cohesion, and reinforced the power of the city-state. In essence, The Isthmian Games demonstrate how ancient societies engineered social, religious, and economic systems that balanced human ambition with civic responsibility. Athletic achievement was a path to glory, commerce was a vehicle of influence, and ritual ensured moral and divine alignment. Corinth's citizens navigated these overlapping spheres with skill, ambition, and reverence, creating a festival that was at once thrilling, sacred, and profoundly meaningful. In ancient Rome, wine was not merely a drink, it was a foundation of daily life, a marker of status, and a symbol of cultural identity. From the humblest plebeian to the most powerful senator, wine permeated social, religious, and medical practices. It was integrated into every sphere, shaping interactions, ceremonies, and even political maneuvering. Roman viticulture began as a pragmatic pursuit, but soon became a cultural statement, reflecting both the empire's agricultural ingenuity and its societal hierarchy. Vineyard placement, soil selection, pruning methods, and harvesting were guided by tradition, experimentation, and sometimes superstition. Farmers observed lunar cycles, weather patterns, and seasonal omens, blending practical agricultural knowledge with ritual precision. Harvesting was not a solitary endeavor. It was a communal event, combining labor with prayer, song, and festivity. Workers sang while cutting grapes, invoking blessings for a fruitful yield, and ensuring that labor was both productive and spiritually aligned. Wine was stored in amphorae, their porous clay bodies, allowing for subtle aging but also introducing variability. Each batch was unique, and taste was a reflection of skill, terroir, and luck. Romans often flavored wine with honey, herbs, spices, or even seawater, creating diverse profiles suited to different occasions, palates, and medicinal purposes. Drinking wine straight, undiluted, was considered barbaric, a sign of excess or lack of discipline. Dilution with water was standard, symbolizing moderation, refinement, and social education. Even the act of mixing, the ratio of water to wine, and the vessel used conveyed class, status, and cultural literacy. Wine permeated religious life. Libations were poured to gods. Temples saw ritual sacrifices, accompanied by ceremonial drinking, and festivals relied on wine as a sacred medium connecting mortals to divinity. Bacchic rites, though sometimes viewed with suspicion, celebrated freedom, ecstasy, and the blurring of social hierarchies. Wine was both practical and symbolic, hydrating, nourishing, and spiritually elevating. It carried duality, pleasure and discipline, indulgence and restraint. In social contexts, wine was a medium of communication, a tool of networking, and a marker of etiquette. Symposia, private gatherings, and public banquets followed strict conventions. Moderation was praised. Overindulgence was mocked, though common. Drinking games, toasts, and ritualized toasting created shared experiences, reinforcing bonds between participants. Gender roles were reflected in consumption patterns. Elite women often observed propriety in public, while private gatherings allowed nuanced engagement. Wine was a language of connection, expressing hospitality, status, and mutual understanding. Medical beliefs intertwined with viticulture. Wine was prescribed as treatment, its properties believed to balance humors, cleanse the body, or soothe ailments. Physicians recommended different wines for digestive issues, fevers, or even mental health. The intersection of medicine, ritual, and consumption highlighted Roman attention to both the physical and symbolic benefits of wine. Drinking was never casual. It was embedded in a worldview where human action, divine favor, and natural balance converged. The economics of wine were equally significant. Vineyards became assets, managed for quality and quantity. Merchants transported amphorae across the empire, connecting rural production with urban demand. Rome's expansion spread viticulture, adapting grape cultivation to diverse climates while exporting cultural practices alongside commodities. Wine was both material and cultural capital, a bridge linking economy, identity, and empire. Public and private drinking spaces reinforced hierarchy. Tricliniums, reclining couches, and decorated dining rooms signaled status. Seating arrangements reflected political rank, family lineage, and social alliances. Service, ritualized pouring, and ceremonial toasting were performances of civility and power. Even the taste, clarity, and aroma of wine conveyed information about the host's discernment, wealth, and sophistication. Despite rules, excess was part of life. Festivals, banquets, and Bacchic celebrations often saw indulgence, revelry, and debauchery, yet public expectation imposed a delicate balance. The Romans understood the performative nature of pleasure to enjoy, but within social and moral limits. Excess became spectacle, cautionary tale, or political commentary. Poets, satirists, and philosophers wrote extensively about the virtues and vices of wine, embedding cultural reflection into everyday consumption. Wine production and consumption also shaped cultural continuity. After Rome's fall, monastic communities preserved viticulture, combining practical knowledge with spiritual observance. Monks maintained vineyards, refined fermentation techniques, and integrated wine into liturgical practice, ensuring that Roman traditions persisted into the medieval period. Wine became a medium through which knowledge, ritual, and taste traversed centuries, linking past and present. The symbolism of wine extended to personal identity. For a Roman citizen, mastery over wine, whether through knowledge, taste, or consumption, was an indicator of civilization, refinement, and social competence. It was a medium through which individuals displayed virtue, moderation, and cultural literacy. Even the smallest errors over pouring, drinking too quickly, or using improper vessels could signal ignorance, indulgence, or social misjudgment. Wine was thus embedded in the moral and social code of Roman life, reflecting values as much as flavor. In festivals, political gatherings, and domestic rituals, wine intertwined with storytelling, performance, and identity. Banquets were stages upon which social hierarchies, alliances, and rivalries played out. Conversation, poetry, and jest accompanied every sip, transforming drinking into an interactive performance. Wine communicated wealth, education, taste, and morality simultaneously. The act of drinking became a ritual of both pleasure and social negotiation, reinforcing civic norms while celebrating human skill and divine favor. Roman wine culture exemplifies the broader Roman ethos: discipline, refinement, and strategic enjoyment. It was a society where material resources, agricultural skill, spiritual devotion, and social performance converged in a single potent beverage. Wine was nourishment, celebration, medicine, and communication, a reflection of Rome itself, complex, hierarchical, ritualized, and interconnected. In understanding Roman wine, one glimpses the intricate web of cultural expectation, personal agency, and social signaling that defined life in the empire. Every amphora, every banquet, every sip was a statement, a ritual, a negotiation of identity. Wine was more than liquid. It was a mirror of society, a marker of civilization, and a thread linking human experience across time. Across centuries and civilizations, certain patterns emerge. Humans have always negotiated identity, survival, and status through ritual, appearance, and social performance. While the contexts of medieval Europe, Tudor England, and ancient Greece and Rome differed widely, the underlying drivers of behavior, the desire for recognition, the pursuit of safety, and the management of social perception remained remarkably consistent. In the Middle Ages, survival dictated movement, decision-making, and social interactions. People were constantly on the move, responding to crop failures, military threats, or economic pressures. Travel was not a leisurely pursuit, but a necessary means of ensuring life, family, and community survival. Roads were treacherous, maps incomplete, and the risk of getting lost high. The mobility of medieval populations was not optional, but a structured adaptation to uncertainty. Every decision, from relocating households to arranging labor, reflected an understanding of environmental, economic, and political constraints. Amid this mobility, social rituals shaped daily life. Left-handedness was stigmatized, sneezing required blessings, and silence could signify spiritual danger. Hair, possessions, and clothing carried moral and practical weight. Even small actions, choosing how to sit, interact, or gesture, communicated adherence to social norms and survival strategies. People formed deep attachments to their tools and possessions, not merely as objects, but as companions, vital for life. Shoes, often singular and repaired repeatedly, were more than clothing, they were lifelines. This intense intertwining of survival, social signaling, and ritualized behavior defined the medieval experience. Transitioning to Tudor England, survival was less about daily subsistence and more about navigating rigid social hierarchies and moral expectations. Female beauty became a mechanism through which women exercised subtle power while remaining constrained. Paleness, delicacy, soft hands, controlled speech, and meticulous dress were instruments of social negotiation. Failure to conform could jeopardize marriage prospects, family alliances, or personal safety. At court, queens and noblewomen experienced extreme scrutiny. Their appearance, gestures, and comportment were considered reflective of dynastic stability. In this context, appearance was both currency and constraint. Cosmetics were necessary, yet morally suspect. Clothing enforced hierarchy, yet allowed subtle personal agency. Behavior was regulated, but tactical ingenuity permitted women to navigate these rules to influence outcomes. The Tudor era illustrates a shift from survival-driven adaptation in the Middle Ages to socially codified navigation of appearance and status. Power could be wielded through compliance, subtly altering perception while adhering to societal expectations. Ancient Greece, particularly through the lens of the Isthmian Games, offers another perspective: performance, recognition, and divine favor intertwined. Athletic skill was a path to fame, political influence, and spiritual approval. Victories were celebrated in poetry, music, and public honor, embedding human achievement within a religious and civic framework. Festivals, like the Isthmian Games, were multifunctional. Athletic competition, religious ritual, and economic activity merged, creating a microcosm of society in which individual ambition, community identity, and divine oversight converged. The economic dimension of these festivals highlights another constant. Commerce and social engagement were inseparable from ritual and prestige. Merchants, artisans, and travelers leveraged cultural gatherings for trade and influence, reflecting the human tendency to integrate material opportunity with social and spiritual life. Athletes and artists alike were not merely performers. They were active participants in a structured, ritualized, and economically meaningful spectacle. Victory and recognition carried tangible benefits, reinforcing a culture in which public achievement validated individual and communal identity. Roman wine culture complements these insights, illustrating how a simple commodity wine could encapsulate social norms, ritual significance, and personal identity. Production required technical knowledge, ritual observance, and communal labor. Consumption was governed by etiquette. Wine was medicinal, symbolic, and socially communicative, a medium through which discipline, refinement, and status were conveyed. It exemplifies how material culture intersects with ritualized social expectations, reflecting broader societal values and structures. Taken together, these historical contexts reveal recurring human strategies, whether through ritualized blessing of a sneeze, enforced cosmetic practice, or ceremonial athletic competition. Humans have consistently sought to manage risk, assert identity, and influence social perception. Survival, appearance, achievement, and compliance coexisted with agency, ingenuity, and subtle resistance. Medieval peasants, Tudor women, and Greek athletes navigated constraints imposed by environment, society, or religion, yet found avenues for self-expression, recognition, and advancement. Memory and legacy are another unifying theme. In the Middle Ages, fear of being forgotten influenced naming practices, record-keeping, and ritual observances. In Tudor England, a woman's beauty and behavior were linked to familial and dynastic reputation. In ancient Greece, athletic victories were immortalized in poetry, sculpture, and public record. Across time, humans have sought permanence, whether through memory, recognition, or material record, shaping behavior in anticipation of future judgment. Religious and moral frameworks consistently guided behavior. Medieval blessings, Tudor moral codes, and Greek rituals demonstrate that divine or social oversight was central to daily life. Compliance with spiritual or societal norms secured safety, favor, and prestige. Yet, within these frameworks, individuals exercised agency, adapting practices to personal circumstances, negotiating appearance and behavior, and leveraging societal expectations to their advantage. The interplay between risk and reward is evident in all these contexts. Medieval mobility entailed exposure to danger, but promised survival. Tudor beauty required compliance, but offered influence. Greek athletic competition carried physical peril, but conferred glory. Wine culture, too, balanced pleasure and discipline, social signaling and spiritual ritual, indulgence and moderation. Across centuries, humans have constantly weighed costs, benefits, and social consequences, crafting strategies to maximize advantage while navigating constraints. Social signaling remained a critical mechanism in every period. Appearances, gestures, and rituals communicated status, virtue, and competence. Hair, skin, clothing, posture, and behavior functioned as semiotic tools, conveying messages about morality, skill, and social position. The ability to interpret and manipulate these signals was a form of power, whether exercised by a medieval peasant, a Tudor noblewoman, or a Roman citizen at a symposium. Finally, these practices illustrate the human tendency to intertwine the practical and the symbolic. Survival strategies were ritualized. Beauty practices became political tools. Athletic contests were spiritual ceremonies. Wine served as nourishment, medicine, and social language. Across cultures, humans transformed pragmatic action into cultural meaning, embedding personal, communal, and divine narratives into daily life. Understanding these historical dynamics offers insight into contemporary human behavior. Modern rituals, social hierarchies, and cultural norms are echoes of ancient practices, shaped by enduring strategies for survival, recognition, and influence. Observing medieval mobility, Tudor beauty codes, Isthmian games, and Roman wine culture reveals the continuity of human ingenuity, adaptation, and social negotiation, emphasizing that while circumstances change, the underlying motivations remain remarkably consistent. In medieval Europe, life was governed by a mixture of practical necessity, religious doctrine, and superstition, creating a world that to modern eyes might seem at once rigid, strange, and intensely symbolic. Every act, from waking in the morning to tending crops, was framed within a tapestry of beliefs that sought to explain uncertainty, control risk, and maintain social order. One of the most pervasive influences on daily life was the church. Monastic schedules dictated the rhythm of work and prayer, dividing the day into canonical hours, punctuated by the tolling of bells. The 9-to-5 workday, which today seems mundane and rational, actually evolved from these spiritual routines. Obedience, devotion, and discipline were paramount. Efficiency was secondary. Labor was often structured around prayer times, with rest, reflection, and communal activity interwoven into productivity. Time itself was understood as a sacred framework, each hour carrying moral as well as practical weight. Beyond structured work, superstition pervaded ordinary actions. Sneezing, for instance, was interpreted as a moment of vulnerability. Medieval people believed that the soul could escape or be seized by evil forces during a sneeze, prompting the now familiar phrase, "Bless you," originally a prayer for protection against demons. Left-handedness was associated with chaos, witchcraft, and moral deviance. Those born left-handed were pressured into using their right hand for writing, combat, and prayer, illustrating how societal norms imposed physical conformity under the guise of spiritual propriety. Daily survival reinforced ritualized behavior. Shoes were precious and often singular, repaired for years. Naming tools and weapons as companions reflected a deep emotional and practical bond with objects essential for life. Mirrors were rare, so people gauged appearance socially rather than visually, relying on communal feedback to maintain propriety and status. Silence was feared, linked with death, spirits, or misfortune, making noise a constant companion in shared living spaces. Even hair carried symbolic weight. Women's hair had to reflect virtue, while haircutting could signify punishment, humiliation, or spiritual cleansing. Social rituals reinforced cohesion and hierarchy. Table manners were not merely aesthetic, but were essential to prevent disease in shared, unsanitary meals. Courteous gestures, hand-washing, and utensil use became markers of moral and social refinement. The handshake emerged as a gesture of trust, signaling that no weapons were hidden, evolving into a broader symbol of equality and professional respect. Clothing, colors, and fabric signified status, wealth, or moral virtue, creating a visual code that regulated interaction and reinforced societal expectations. Religious festivals and holy days provided structured pauses in labor, blending work, celebration, and communal observation. The weekend, formalized much later, originated in part from these mandated feast days. Public rituals, including processions, sacrifices, and mass attendance, integrated spirituality with social obligation. Even expressions like God Save the King carried roots in medieval spiritual practice, initially serving as protective prayers for rulers and evolving into patriotic and nationalistic symbols. Medieval superstition also shaped personal decision-making. Certain days were deemed unlucky for business, travel, or marriage, reflecting a worldview where temporal cycles influenced fate. Births, deaths, and marriages were ritualized to align with moral, spiritual, and communal expectations. Fear of premature burial led to wakes, careful observation of the dead, and elaborate funerary customs. Memory, legacy, and social recognition were paramount, driving practices that ensured individuals were remembered, honored, and morally accounted for. Despite the harshness, medieval life was not devoid of humor, festivity, or resilience. Festivals, carnivals, and communal gatherings offered moments of release, entertainment, and social bonding. Jokes, storytelling, music, and public games punctuated laborious routines, revealing a society capable of joy amid uncertainty. Even in the shadow of pestilence, famine, or political instability, communities maintained cultural continuity through ritualized celebration and shared narrative. Magic and superstition operated alongside religious orthodoxy. Amulets, charms, and blessings were commonplace, bridging the gap between divine intervention and human agency. Healing practices combined herbal remedies, prayers, and ritual gestures, reflecting an understanding of medicine that was empirical, spiritual, and symbolic all at once. Disease, misfortune, and misbehavior were often interpreted as signs of moral imbalance or spiritual offense, and remedies involved both material and ritualized solutions. Commerce and labor also carried ritual weight. Markets were not simply economic spaces, but social and cultural hubs. Tradesmen observed symbolic practices to ensure fair exchange, safety, and success. Guilds enforced conduct, codified techniques, and ritualized initiation, blending apprenticeship with moral and social training. Even seemingly mundane actions were imbued with layered meaning, from the timing of deliveries to the presentation of goods. The medieval worldview, in its blend of religion, superstition, and practical necessity, fostered a society where ritual governed behavior at every level. From the peasant tilling fields to the noble attending court, individuals navigated a landscape of moral, spiritual, and practical expectations. Obedience, discipline, and adherence to communal norms were as crucial as physical labor, shaping every aspect of life from birth to death. Education and literacy were rare but deeply valued in certain contexts. Scribes, clerics, and nobles maintained records, wrote letters, and preserved knowledge. Love letters were dictated to literate scribes, following strict conventions. Religious and legal texts codified morality, governance, and social order. Memory and record-keeping were tools to preserve identity, maintain hierarchy, and transmit culture across generations. In some medieval beliefs, superstitions, and rituals created a cohesive yet complex society, one in which human behavior was guided simultaneously by fear, faith, necessity, and ingenuity. Every gesture, habit, and custom was informed by a layered understanding of survival, morality, and social expectation. Humor, festivity, and resilience existed alongside discipline, devotion, and superstition, demonstrating that medieval people navigated their world with practical wisdom, cultural sophistication, and spiritual awareness. Tudor England was a world obsessed with appearance, hierarchy, and moral performance. Unlike the survival-focused rhythms of medieval life, the Tudor era placed intense emphasis on social signaling, particularly through female beauty, dress, and behavior. Here, the body became a canvas upon which social, political, and religious expectations were inscribed. Women navigated a system in which compliance and display were simultaneously tools of confluence and instruments of control. Pale skin was the gold standard, signaling indoor life, refinement, and elite status. Exposure to labor outdoors resulted in tanned or darker skin, which marked women as lower class or independent. Soft hands, delicate features, and a demure demeanor were prized, reinforcing gender norms that equated physical delicacy with virtue and obedience. Women were expected to hide strength or assertiveness, for visible physical power could provoke suspicion, social censure, or accusations of unfemininity. Appearance was a form of social currency, determining marriage prospects, family alliances, and personal safety. Cosmetics were paradoxical, widely used, yet publicly condemned. Women employed white lead-based powders to lighten skin, rouge for cheeks, and pigments to conceal blemishes. Yet moralists decried these practices as deceitful. A Tudor woman's success depended on maintaining flawless appearance under constant scrutiny, balancing societal expectation with practical performance. Beauty was both a tool and a trap, offering leverage while reinforcing the limitations imposed by patriarchal oversight. Marriage was central to a woman's social and economic position. Early marriage was common, as youth and beauty directly influenced prospects. Beyond personal inclination, beauty functioned as a social and dynastic instrument, allowing families to secure alliances, property, and political influence. Queens' appearances were closely monitored. Their bodies became symbols of dynastic legitimacy, and any blemish, imperfection, or misstep could carry political consequence. Within these confines, women exercised subtle agency, manipulating clothing, gestures, and conversation to influence outcomes while remaining outwardly compliant. Sumptuary laws reinforced hierarchy through clothing and adornment. Regulations dictated who could wear specific fabrics, jewelry, and colors, codifying social distinction in visible form. Dress, hairstyle, and even the length of a sleeve broadcast social position, morality, and obedience. While these laws constrained personal expression, clever navigation of fashion, color, and accessory selection allowed women to signal sophistication, allegiance, and aspiration. Clothing was language. Mastery conveyed intelligence, taste, and subtle power. Court life amplified these dynamics. Banquets, balls, and public appearances demanded ritualized behavior. Speech was controlled. Women were expected to contribute only when invited, maintaining modesty and demonstrating obedience. Social missteps could have consequences ranging from gossip to political vulnerability. Yet, within these parameters, women could cultivate influence through charm, wit, and visual presentation, subtly shaping outcomes in courtly, familial, or commercial negotiations. Religion intertwined with social expectation. The Protestant and Catholic divide influenced not only worship but also appearance and morality. Fashion, adornment, and public conduct were moralized, linking external display with spiritual virtue. A woman's appearance communicated piety, obedience, and ethical standing. Failure to comply with these expectations could result in public censure or even legal repercussions. Social surveillance was constant as peers, family, and clergy collectively enforced normative behavior. Education and literacy were limited but powerful. Noble women learned reading, writing, and languages primarily to manage correspondence, maintain social networks, and administer estates. Letters, poetry, and subtle negotiation allowed women to extend influence beyond physical presence. Knowledge of etiquette, symbolism, and rhetoric became a form of soft power, complementing visual performance. In a world where beauty and behavior were rigorously evaluated, intellectual skill became another avenue to navigate social structures. Women leveraged appearance, behavior, and ritualized participation to exert strategic influence. Jewelry, fabrics, posture, and gesture were carefully selected for maximum social impact. At court, women could manipulate perception to curry favor, form alliances, or advance familial interests. Even in constrained circumstances, beauty functioned as a tool to negotiate, persuade, and assert agency. These strategies highlight a critical Tudor paradox. Constraint fostered creativity and social intelligence. As women navigated rigid structures with subtlety and nuance, public festivals, religious holidays, and courtly entertainments provided spaces for regulated subversion. Temporary relaxation of social norms allowed women to experiment with appearance, express individuality, and gauge social response. Masquerades, dances, and pageants were opportunities to assert identity within a controlled environment. Here, the performative nature of beauty, dress, and behavior was both literal and symbolic, demonstrating the intersection of art, morality, and social strategy. Despite intense regulation, humor and individuality persisted. Women employed wit, clever wordplay, and subtle gestures to signal intelligence or discontent. Social observation was acute. Every gesture, expression, and choice of accessory could be read, interpreted, and responded to by peers and superiors. Mastery of these social codes required keen awareness, adaptability, and strategic foresight, reinforcing the Tudor ethos of appearance as both armor and instrument. Tudor England thus illustrates the complex interplay between personal agency and social constraint. Women navigated expectations of beauty, decorum, and morality to influence outcomes, maintain status, and survive politically and socially. Appearance was inseparable from power, yet it was circumscribed by external judgment, legal regulation, and moral expectation. In this environment, skillful management of dress, gesture, and expression became critical for success, reflecting broader societal priorities that linked visual performance with trust, legitimacy, and authority. The legacy of these practices extends beyond history. Modern concepts of beauty, fashion, and social signaling often echo Tudor preoccupations, though stripped of legal or moral enforcement. The Tudor era demonstrates that appearance is never merely aesthetic. It is a medium for negotiation, a marker of social position, and a mechanism for personal and political influence. By examining Tudor women, we see how structured systems of expectation can foster both constraint and subtle agency, revealing the enduring complexity of human social behavior. Ultimately, Tudor England was a society where power, beauty, and morality intersected in daily life. Female bodies were sites of observation, control, and strategy. Appearance was currency, compliance a requirement, and subtle manipulation a form of empowerment. The interplay of regulation, performance, and personal initiative illuminates how humans navigate complex social hierarchies across time. In a culture obsessed with visible virtue and hierarchical display, survival and influence depended as much on cunning, subtlety, and observation as on inherited status or physical attributes. In ancient Greece, the rhythm of life was inseparable from ritual, religion, and communal spectacle. Among the most vivid expressions of this interplay were the Isthmian Games, held in the city of Corinth in honor of Poseidon, the god of the sea. Unlike modern sporting events, these games fused athletic competition, religious devotion, and economic activity into a cohesive social and cultural experience. Every foot race, wrestling match, or chariot race was a ritual performance as much as a test of skill, reflecting the Greeks' holistic understanding of human excellence. The games began with sacrifices and ceremonial rites, emphasizing that divine favor was essential for success. Athletes, spectators, and priests alike participated in a ritualized environment where mortal effort was inseparable from spiritual sanction. Poseidon's sanctuary served as the focal point, a reminder that the sea, storms, and maritime power governed both survival and prestige. In Corinth, a thriving maritime hub, this connection was particularly salient. Victory in the games was not only personal glory, but a reflection of civic and divine alignment. Athletic competitions were intense and often dangerous. Foot races tested speed and endurance. Wrestling and boxing combined strength with strategy. Pancration demanded mastery of virtually all forms of physical combat. Chariot racing, with its complex coordination and risk of catastrophic crashes, epitomized the interplay of skill, bravery, and luck. Success brought immediate fame, political influence, and lasting commemoration. Winners were immortalized in poetry, song, and public inscriptions, demonstrating the permanent social and cultural weight of athletic achievement. Yet the games were more than mere athletic contests. They were performances of civic identity and social order. Sacred truces suspended hostilities, allowing participants from rival city-states to travel safely and compete. The festival created a temporary egalitarian space in which status, wealth, and origin were both visible and negotiable. Merchants, artisans, and performers flocked to the games, turning the festival into a hub of commerce, cultural exchange, and economic activity. Corinth leveraged the Isthmian Games to assert its maritime dominance, attract trade, and enhance civic prestige. Music, poetry, and artistic performance were integral to the festival. Victors were celebrated through song, recitation, and visual commemoration. The Greeks recognized that athletic prowess alone was insufficient. Cultural literacy, aesthetic presentation, and ritual participation were equally important in shaping public perception. Competitors and spectators alike engaged in a multi-dimensional cultural display, where religion, art, and physical skill converged to reinforce communal identity. The games also highlighted the interplay between risk and reward. Athletes faced physical danger, public scrutiny, and the possibility of defeat. Yet the rewards, fame, honor, and divine favor were immense. Social mobility, while limited, was possible. A skilled competitor could gain recognition beyond their social station, influencing local politics and community prestige. The games were a microcosm of Greek society, illustrating how individuals could navigate structured systems to maximize personal and civic advantage. Commerce intertwined with ritual and competition. Festival markets attracted traders from across regions who leveraged the congregation of people for economic gain. Artisans sold pottery, textiles, and crafted goods, while merchants negotiated trade deals. The Isthmian Games were thus both a spiritual and economic engine, demonstrating the Greeks' understanding of interdependence between religious observance, social cohesion, and material prosperity. Sacred rites and moral conduct were inseparable from athletic performance. Athletes adhered to strict rules, not only to ensure fairness, but to honor divine expectations. Ritualized warm-ups, sacrifices, and prayers underscored the belief that human effort must align with spiritual sanction. Success was interpreted as both personal achievement and evidence of divine favor, embedding ethical and religious significance into what might otherwise be considered mere sport. Cultural memory and commemoration were paramount. Victories were recorded in inscriptions, celebrated in poems, and visually represented in statues or reliefs. Such memorialization ensured that the accomplishments of athletes and participants endured beyond the festival, reinforcing communal values and transmitting social ideals across generations. The games became a temporal bridge, linking individual achievement with civic continuity and religious observance. Over time, the Isthmian Games evolved under Roman influence. The festival became more international, commercialized, and elaborate. Yet the foundational elements, ritual, competition, and communal participation, remained intact. This evolution illustrates the adaptability of cultural practices. While forms change, underlying functions, identity, recognition, and social cohesion persist. The Isthmian Games reveal broader insights into ancient Greek society. Physical prowess, moral virtue, and religious observance were intertwined. Success was both an individual accomplishment and a communal validation. Festivals like these provided structured opportunities to negotiate social hierarchies, assert civic pride, and engage in commerce. By examining these games, we understand how sport, ritual, and economy were mutually reinforcing, creating a society where public display, religious adherence, and material exchange were inseparable. Even beyond the immediate context, the principles exemplified in the Isthmian Games resonate across time. Humans consistently integrate risk, ritual, performance, and economic opportunity in social structures. Whether in medieval fairs, Tudor courts, or modern sporting events, the combination of spectacle, reward, and social signaling remains central to communal life. In Corinth, the Isthmian Games crystallized this dynamic, offering a lens through which to view the enduring human drive for recognition, stability, and cultural expression. Through these games, we also glimpse the psychological and social dimensions of competition, honor, reputation, and memory-motivated behavior as strongly as physical ability. Athletes trained rigorously, not merely for immediate victory, but to secure lasting social immortality. Civic authorities and religious leaders orchestrated festivals to reinforce moral codes, maintain social order, and cultivate civic identity. In this context, the individual's success became a symbol of collective aspiration, spiritual alignment, and cultural continuity. Finally, the Isthmian Games illustrate how religion, ritual, and commerce were inseparably intertwined in ancient Greek life. Athletic events were embedded within religious frameworks, attracting spectators, traders, and artisans alike. Participation, observation, and economic engagement were mutually reinforcing, creating a holistic societal experience. Success and failure were interpreted through moral, spiritual, and social lenses, revealing a culture deeply attuned to the interconnectedness of human, divine, and communal realms. In ancient Rome, wine was far more than a beverage. It was a cultural cornerstone, a social lubricant, and a symbol of refinement and status. From the bustling streets of Rome to remote villas on the Italian countryside, wine permeated daily life, religious ritual, social interaction, and even medicine. To the Romans, drinking wine was not simply a matter of taste or indulgence. It was a medium through which identity, discipline, and social hierarchy were performed and reinforced. Viticulture expanded across the Roman Empire, adapting to a remarkable variety of climates and terrains. Vineyards were meticulously selected for soil, sun exposure, and water access. Pruning, trellising, harvesting, and fermentation were conducted according to established practices that blended empirical observation with ritualized timing. The act of cultivating grapes and producing wine was simultaneously practical, aesthetic, and spiritual. Laborers sang, prayed, and conducted ceremonies during the harvest, acknowledging the interplay between human effort and divine favor. Wine storage and transportation reflected both technological ingenuity and social signaling. Amphorae, large clay vessels, were used to transport wine across the empire. Their porous nature allowed for aging, though it also introduced variability in flavor, a characteristic the Romans accepted and even appreciated as part of wine's unique identity. Romans also experimented with flavoring. Honey, herbs, spices, and sometimes seawater were added to create distinctive profiles. Each variation carried cultural, medicinal, and symbolic significance, highlighting the sophisticated understanding of taste, ritual, and practical application. Consumption of wine was carefully codified. Drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric and a sign of moral lapse. Water was always mixed, both to moderate potency and demonstrate control. Symposia, social gatherings centered on wine, were governed by rules, rituals, and etiquette. Guests were expected to display moderation, politeness, and deference to hierarchy. Drinking became a performance of refinement, signaling civility, social awareness, and personal discipline. Wine was also gendered. While men often dominated public drinking events, women's participation was regulated and symbolic, reflecting broader societal norms regarding propriety and visibility. Beyond social performance, wine had practical and medicinal applications. Roman medical theory, rooted in the concept of humors, prescribed wine for balancing bodily fluids, aiding digestion, and treating ailments. It was incorporated into culinary practices, remedies, and daily hydration. This dual role, as both nourishment and medicine, reinforced wine's centrality to Roman culture and demonstrated the Romans' integrative approach to life, where pleasure, health, and ritual coexisted. Political and social dimensions were inseparable from wine culture. Banquets served as venues for negotiation, alliance building, and display of wealth. The quality and quantity of wine, the presentation of the table, and the refinement of conversation all conveyed status and influence. Patronage systems relied heavily on hosting ability. Wine, food, and ritualized entertainment became vehicles through which power and prestige were asserted. To Romans, hospitality was both moral duty and opportunity for social advancement, with wine at its symbolic and practical center. Festivals, religious rites, and public celebrations also incorporated wine. Libations honored gods, spirits, and ancestors, emphasizing that human effort and divine favor were intertwined. Sacrifices and ritual drinking reinforced the moral and social order, creating a shared framework of belief and behavior. The act of drinking became a communal practice, simultaneously reinforcing group identity, hierarchy, and piety. Excess, however, was both common and condemned. Public intoxication was criticized as loss of self-control, yet private indulgence was widespread. This tension reveals a cultural negotiation between enjoyment, moderation, and social expectation. Wine was therefore a medium through which Romans explored balance, virtue, and social performance, highlighting the complexity of daily life within structured hierarchies. Economically, wine production and trade were central to the empire's prosperity. Vineyards employed large numbers of laborers, facilitated regional specialization, and linked rural production with urban consumption. Wine trade fostered commerce, transportation networks, and cultural exchange. Distinctions in wine quality and origin reinforced social hierarchies. Imported, aged, or flavored wines were markers of elite status, while locally produced varieties were more common among the general populace. The circulation of wine reflected and reinforced economic, social, and political structures across the empire. Wine culture persisted after the fall of Rome, largely through monastic communities. Monks cultivated vineyards, refined production techniques, and preserved viticulture knowledge. These religious institutions adapted Roman methods for spiritual and practical purposes, ensuring continuity of practice and contributing to the evolution of European wine culture. In this way, ancient practices influenced medieval routines, social rituals, and even agricultural methods, demonstrating the longevity of Roman cultural frameworks. The ritualized, performative, and practical dimensions of wine culture illustrate a broader Roman worldview, one that integrated labor, leisure, spirituality, and social structure. Drinking wine was not an isolated act. It was embedded in a complex network of relationships, expectations, and cultural meanings. Each cup served as a microcosm of Roman life, linking the personal with the political, pleasure with propriety, and nature with civilization. Even minor details, such as the choice of dilution, accompaniment of food, or seating arrangement at banquets, carried moral, aesthetic, and social weight. Participation in these practices demanded awareness, etiquette, and judgment, reflecting a society that codified behavior to convey status, ethics, and cultural literacy. Wine was simultaneously utilitarian, recreational, medicinal, and symbolic, bridging the gap between necessity and display. In examining Roman wine culture, one observes the interconnectedness of agriculture, commerce, religion, and social signaling. Every step, from vineyard to amphora to symposium, reinforced a structured worldview. Individuals were expected to navigate these systems with skill, knowledge, and decorum. Success, in consumption as in production, reflected understanding of both practical craft and cultural expectation. Ultimately, Roman wine culture exemplifies the empire's emphasis on discipline, refinement, and integration of human experience. Pleasure was framed by morality. Consumption was guided by etiquette. Production was intertwined with ritual. Wine functioned as a social glue, a vehicle for status, and a reflection of civilization itself. Through it, we glimpse a world in which every human act was layered with meaning, expectation, and consequence, where even the simplest gesture, raising a cup, was suffused with cultural, moral, and political significance. Across centuries, from the medieval villages of England to the courts of Tudor queens, from the athletic arenas of Corinth to the vineyards of Rome, human societies have consistently intertwined ritual, social expectation, and cultural performance. While the surface forms, clothing, festivals, or drinking customs shifted dramatically, the underlying impulses that drove behavior, organized communities, and communicated status reveal remarkable continuity. These historical contexts illuminate a central truth. Humans are creatures of meaning-making, social signaling, and cultural adaptation, navigating constraints, expectations, and opportunities across time and space. In medieval Europe, survival dictated patterns of mobility, labor, and ritual. Roads were rough, travel hazardous, and relocation often imposed by necessity rather than choice. People developed social norms and practices as pragmatic responses to scarcity, danger, and communal living. Sneezing, for example, was not merely a bodily reflex. It was a perceived spiritual vulnerability requiring blessings. Hair, clothing, and possessions carried moral, social, and functional significance, reflecting a society where symbolism and utility were inseparable. Daily life was punctuated by fear, humor, ceremony, and adaptation, a complex negotiation of physical survival and social identity. Medieval peoples' attachment to possessions, meticulous attention to memory, and fear of silence highlight the human need for continuity, recognition, and reassurance. One could argue that many contemporary behaviors' valuation of property, concern for reputation, and rituals surrounding life and death have their roots in these early social imperatives. While modern convenience has replaced the physical hardship of medieval mobility, the psychological and cultural frameworks remain, demonstrating the persistence of foundational human concerns across centuries. Tudor England shifted the focus from survival to appearance, social compliance, and hierarchical navigation. Female beauty became a form of currency, tightly controlled through law, custom, and moral expectations. Pale skin, delicate features, and compliant demeanor communicated virtue, obedience, and social standing. Cosmetology, dress, and gesture became carefully monitored tools, where minor missteps could have significant social or political consequences. Yet, within these constraints, women exercised subtle agency, leveraging visual performance and social intelligence to influence outcomes. The Tudor era reveals how social systems encode power in visible and performative forms. Appearance was both constraint and opportunity. Compliance offered safety, while clever negotiation enabled influence. This interplay between restriction and agency demonstrates a timeless human pattern. The tension between societal norms and individual strategy. Across time, individuals have navigated external pressures creatively. finding opportunities for self-expression and leverage even within highly regulated contexts. The Isthmian Games of ancient Greece further illustrate this theme of structured participation. Athletic competition, religious ritual, and commerce intertwined in Corinthian society to create multifaceted public spectacles. Athletes risked bodily harm and social evaluation, yet success granted lasting fame, civic prestige, and divine approval. Festivals temporarily restructured hierarchies, suspended hostilities, and encouraged economic exchange, showing how societies ritualize competition to reinforce cultural cohesion and civic identity. The games also highlight the interplay between risk, reward, and memory. Human effort is always evaluated against social, moral, and spiritual frameworks, and success is both personal and collective. Roman wine culture presents yet another lens through which to view social signaling, ritualized practice, and structured leisure. Wine permeated daily life as nourishment, medicine, and performance of status. Etiquette, moderation, and ceremonial observance transformed a common beverage into a medium for social negotiation, moral demonstration, and civic display. The integration of labor, ritual, and consumption in Roman viticulture emphasizes the continuity of practical and symbolic meaning, a pattern echoed across human societies. Utility and ritual, labor and leisure, pleasure and morality often coexist in layered cultural practices. Examining these for historical contexts, medieval survival, Tudor appearance politics, Greek athletic religious festivals, and Roman viticulture reveals persistent themes. Humans consistently impose meaning on daily practices. Sneezing, clothing, athletic endeavor, or drinking wine are never neutral acts. They communicate identity, morality, and social alignment. Use ritual to structure uncertainty, whether through blessing a sneeze, participating in courtly etiquette, performing in games, or conducting a libation. Ritual mediates risk, ensures cohesion, and enforces norms. Balance personal agency and social constraint. Individuals navigate hierarchies, laws, and expectations creatively, exercising influence within bounded systems. Link material and symbolic worlds, possessions, appearance, athletic skill, or wine quality function simultaneously as tools, status markers, and cultural signifiers. Value, memory, and recognition, commemoration, poetry, inscriptions, or public praise extend social impact beyond immediate experience, reflecting a desire for lasting social significance. In these ways, human behavior exhibits remarkable structural continuity, even as material conditions, technology, and political systems evolve. The medieval emphasis on survival and ritual, the Tudor preoccupation with beauty and hierarchy, the Greek integration of sport, commerce, and religion, and the Roman sophistication of viticulture all represent interconnected strategies for managing uncertainty, asserting identity, and reinforcing communal values. Contemporary life retains echoes of these patterns. Social media rituals, public ceremonies, fashion codes, athletic competitions, and culinary practices all serve analogous functions. They communicate status, reinforce norms, and mediate human interaction. While forms have changed, the underlying impulses remain consistent. Humans seek recognition, structure, and meaning through performance, ritual, and social engagement. The study of these historical contexts also illuminates the interdependence of culture, economy, and power. Festivals, banquets, and athletic events were never purely recreational. They structured trade, influenced political dynamics, and reinforced social hierarchies. Wine production was simultaneously agricultural, commercial, and ritualized. Beauty regulations constrained individuals while enabling negotiation within social systems. Across eras, material and symbolic domains are entwined, reflecting the holistic nature of human cultural practices. Finally, these historical narratives underscore the creativity, adaptability, and resilience of human beings. Medieval peasants, Tudor courtiers, Greek athletes, and Roman vintners all navigated complex webs of expectation and opportunity. They invented practices, optimized strategies, and engaged in ritualized behavior to survive, thrive, and leave enduring legacies. In this sense, history is not merely a record of events, but a lens into the persistent architecture of human social life, where survival, recognition, and influence intersect. Ultimately, the sweep from medieval villages to Tudor courts, Greek arenas, and Roman vineyards highlights a central insight. Culture is both constraint and opportunity, ritual and innovation, survival and performance. By examining these societies, we recognize enduring human patterns, our constant negotiation between personal agency and social expectation, our need for structure and meaning, and our pursuit of recognition, prestige, and influence. In reflecting on these eras together, a broad pattern emerges. Human behavior, regardless of time or place, is strategically structured, symbolically rich, and socially embedded. Daily actions, from the mundane to the spectacular, carry significance beyond immediate utility. Sneezing, dressing, competing, or drinking wine are part of a continuum of human effort to navigate risk, assert identity, and establish memory. History, then, is not a distant past. It is a mirror reflecting the timeless human quest for meaning, order, and recognition through the lens of medieval, Tudor, Greek, and Roman life. We observe the enduring logic of human society. Constraints provoke creativity. Ritual structures, behavior, performance communicates identity, and recognition drives effort. These patterns resonate across centuries, reminding us that beneath every modern custom, celebration, or social interaction lies a deeply rooted human impulse to be seen, understood, and remembered. In conclusion, the exploration of mobility, appearance, ritual, and consumption across these historical contexts reveals the continuity of human cultural intelligence. Whether navigating the hazards of medieval roads, the expectations of Tudor courts, the intensity of Greek games, or the social codes of Roman wine culture, humans consistently seek order, identity, and legacy through structured practices. By studying these past patterns, we gain insight not only into history, but into the enduring dynamics of our own social world, highlighting the timeless interplay between human creativity, constraint, and cultural expression.